Good evening, everyone.
Evening.
Research is to see what everybody else has seen and to think what everybody else has thought. That was according to Albert Zent Georgi. So once again, good evening, everyone. I am Dr. Glenda N, Rito, the Senior Education Program Specialist from the Schools Division of Camarines Norte, Region 5, Bicol. I am your moderator for this evening as we continue to explore the wonders of research process. Our event for this evening is an initiative of the ETCOR Educational Center under its advocacy project, Sagip Mananaliksik for Everyone, which main aim is to help researchers, that is, students and professionals all over the country, especially during this time of pandemic. Project Sagip Mananaliksik for Everyone involves giving a series of free webinars on quantitative and qualitative research, which are open for both the students and teachers or professionals, given by research consultants who are research experts from the different parts of the country and are immersed in the conduct and teaching of research from various levels. They are serving as volunteer speakers or lecturers and moderators. Meanwhile, Project Sagip Mananaliksik, that is one-on-one, adapts one senior high school learner from ETCOR's list of students beneficiaries, assisting them for free excuse me, in their SHS research journey. Both these projects Both these projects are with DepEd Advisory. We would like to acknowledge and recognize the overall project coordinators for these projects, Dr. Bernadette L. Legarde for the For Everyone, and Dr. Adrian Lawrence P. Carbajal for the One-on-One project. We also have here with us tonight the head research consultant of ETCOR in the person of Dr. Richard D. Sanchez. Last but not least, we also have here the presence of our national consultants, regional coordinators, provincial, division, and city coordinators, and all ETCOR research consultants. And of course, we have here with us some friends who opted to attend this lecture series regarding research. To formally start our lecture series, may I call in Mr. Lemuel M. Mariano, a licensed professional teacher who is a classroom teacher from St. Louis University, LHS Junior High in Baguio City. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome with a virtual clap, Sir Lemuel M. Mariano. Sir Lemuel?
Naririnig po ba ako?
Yes po, medyo mahina lang.
Medyo mahina lang po.
Okay na po, okay na.
Ma'am? Okay. So, yeah. Okay po. Sa ating kagalang-galang na mga opisyal ng ETCOR na pinangungunahan ni Dr. Richard Sanchez, sa mga kasapi at ng ating organisasyon, at sa ating mga bisita at tagapakinig, binabati po namin kayo ng isang malamig at mapagpalang gabi sa ating lahat mula sa friendliest city sa Pilipinas, Baguio City. Hindi may kakaila na sa kasalukuyang panahon, tayo ay humaharap sa mga iba't ibang hamon sa ating lipunan. Liban sa pandemya, sunod-sunod na unos at bagyo ang bumisita sa ating bansa. Ito at ang iba pang problema sa ating buhay ang siyang dahilan upang lalo nating taigtingin ang paghubog sa ating kakayahang magsaliksik sa ngalan ng siyensya ng mga solusyon upang marating at mapaganda ang kalidad ng ating buhay at ng mga susunod pang henerasyon. Sa ating paksang pinamagatang Drawing Conclusions from Research Findings, Formulating Recommendations, ito ay isang napapanahong paksa di lamang sa ating mga miyembro, kundi sa lahat ng mga tagapakinig at mananaliksik sa buong bansa. Alam ko na sa pagtatalakay ng paksang ito ay muling mabibigyan ng linaw ang mga batayan na dapat na isaalang-alang upang tayo ay makagawa ng mga desisyon na siyang magdadala sa atin tungo sa mas payapa at mas maunlad na bansa. Isang masigabong pagsalubong din ang ating ibinibigay sa ating mahusay at mapagkakatiwalaang tagapagtalakay ngayong gabi, walang iba kundi si Ginoong Jose Victoriano-Valdez. Muli, halina't sabay-sabay nating tuklasin at bisitahin ang mga gabay tungo sa paglikha ng makabuluhang desisyon sa paksang pinamagatang Drawing Conclusions from Research Findings, Formulating Recommendations. Ako po, ang inyong lingkod, Lemuel Mariano, bumabati sa inyo ng isang magandang gabi as a friend. Salamat po.
Maraming salamat po, Ginoong Lemuel Mariano. So dahil ikaw ay nagtagalog, napilitan akong magsalita sa Tagalog. Okay. So thank you very much, Sir Lemuel, for that very heartwarming welcome remarks. Okay. So So before we start with this lecture series, let us all be reminded with the following virtual protocols and etiquettes. Of course, dahil ngayon pong pandemic ay palagi naman tayong naka-virtual, we already know these protocols and etiquettes. Pero maganda rin siyempre na mabalikan po natin yun. Okay, so as usual, so kindly turn off your microphone in the duration of the talk that will be given. You may or may not open your cams. If you will be opening your cam, please use as identification the acronym of your institution and your last name and first name. Say, for example, we have here PNU, then Flores Marites. If you have questions or other thoughts, you can type it in the chat box and it will be entertained after the talk. The topic that will be discussed this evening has something to do with the question that what do we usually do after the conduct of the research or after we have finished it, and how do we go about in sharing and distributing its results? So, and now, my dear ladies and gentlemen, we are now ready to listen to our speaker for this lecture series. So, let me introduce to you our lecturer or speaker. So, our speaker for this evening to discuss research continues, disseminating research findings and conceptualizing further inquiries is a licensed professional teacher, that is teacher 3 and currently teaching at Candon City High School, SDO Candon City Region 1. So he is a Master of Arts in Teaching Filipino graduate from the University of Northern Philippines in Vigan City. So currently, he is writing his dissertation for the degree Doctor of Philosophy in Language, major in Filipino at Benguet State University. So Sir Valdez is also one of the researchers of the current program of the Bureau of Learning Delivery, that is Teaching and Learning Delivery, Saliksik sa Filipino sa Edukasyon. He is also a division researcher and the research coordinator of Candon City High School. So friends, join me in welcoming with a round virtual clap Sir Jose Antonio Valdez. Okay, so Sir Jose Valdez. Okay.
Hello, Doc. Narinig po ba ako, Doc?
Yes po. We can hear you loud and clear. Okay po.
Doc, hindi po ako Antonio.
Please,
Anyway po,
Sir Jose. Sir Jose. Okay.
salamat po, Doc Glenda N. Ayan, hello po sa inyong lahat. To the project coordinators, Dr. Lejarde and Dr. Carvajal, to our head consultant, of course, Kuya Doc Richard Sanchez. Kuya, hello. To our national consultants,
Hello po.
to our regional coordinators, special mention to my regional coordinator, Dr. Dominic Patrick Galnones, and to my fellow consultants, to everyone who are here virtually. Ang pagbati po ng magandang gabi sa amin dito sa Ilocos Sur ay naimbag arabi kada kay amin nga awan tilabas na. Ayan, so magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. So I am blessed, honored and thankful at the same time for given the opportunity to discuss and share with you tonight my topic on research conclusions and recommendations. So I know na alam ko na lahat tayo ay familiar na sa topic na ito. So what will I be sharing with you tonight is some sort of sharing on the existing guidelines on how to draw conclusions based on research findings and how to formulate recommendations. So our session topics, which will be the points for our discussion. Number 1, drawing conclusions based on results. And number 2, forming recommendations. We will also be guided with the following questions. First, how do we draw conclusions based on research findings or results? So what are the guidelines in writing conclusions? So what are the dangers to avoid in drawing up conclusions based on quantitative data? And lastly, what are the guidelines in writing the recommendations? So first, let's take a look back on the definition of a research conclusion. So research conclusions are inferences, deductions, abstractions, implications, interpretation, general statements, and or generalizations based upon the findings. So it is the final result, final impression. It is where we summarize the learnings, we wrap and complete the entire project. Unlike the introduction, where you open a dialogue with your readers about the problem and or presents questions, arguments, and what knowledge gaps you aim to bridge, the conclusion provides a clear and concise picture of how you are able to accomplish all of this. So the conclusion is where you describe the consequences of your arguments by justifying to your readers why your arguments matter. It is more extensive and encompassing compared to a particular finding, and in the same vein, various findings may be integrated into a single conclusion. It is also the part of the research paper that brings everything together in a logical manner. As the last part of a research paper, a conclusion provides a clear interpretation of the results of your research in a way that stresses the significance of your study. It is also an opportunity to discuss the meaning of your results beyond what they mean statistically. So it is a judgment or a final decision or judgment after a complete discussion. According to Alunday 2021, it is also a perfect place to form a single clear opinion on your issue, of course, supported by facts. And it is listed numerically and further discussed one by one. Any conclusion that you give about what you found out through your analysis of the data you collected is called a warranted conclusion. According to Pollack 2010, warranted conclusion is supported by an ultimately undefeated argument whose premises are drawn from that evidence. Ibig sabihin, hindi ito kukasyonin kasi ito ay sinusuportahan ng mga makatotohanang datos batay sa kinalabasan ng ating pag-aaral. So this explains how the evidence of finding resulting from your data analysis stands to prove or disprove your conclusion. And by and large, the best kind of proof, of course, to back up our conclusion is the one that is factual and logical or given by correct reasoning. So since the conclusion is the final result, it should give the final impression and it should summarize the learning from the study. It leaves the reader in no doubt that you have answered the questions you pose in your paper. It is a wrap up of the entire project and its completeness. Now let us proceed with the guidelines in writing research conclusions. So the first step when writing our research conclusion should be to restate your research topic. Typically, one sentence can be enough to restate the topic clearly, and you will want to explain why your topic is important. This part of your conclusion should be clear and concise and state only the most important information. It is like echoing your introduction. Excuse me. This approach to writing the conclusion brings your reader to a full circle by using or referring to the same elements you use in your introduction. An example of this would be retelling a scenario you describe in your introduction, but this time, while creating a new understanding of the subject based on the results of your study that further reinforces your arguments and or hypothesis. Example. So reading remains as the greatest means of obtaining information. In previous years, it could only be performed with print materials. However, technology being a game changer has revolutionized it and has allowed digital version of reading which is commonly perceived popular among present-day learners. So we need to restate our research topic. Next is conclusions should not contain any numeral because it generally limits the strong effect or impact and scope of a generalization. No conclusions should be made that are not based on the findings. So instead of saying based on the findings in number 2, it is concluded that all the teachers were qualified to teach in the high school, but most of them were not qualified to teach science. Instead, we say, based on the results, it is concluded that all teachers were qualified to teach in high school, but the majority of them were not qualified to teach science. Next, conclusions should appropriately answer the specific questions raised at the beginning of the investigation in the order they are given under the statement of the problem. Kasi minsan nagiging meaningless ang research kapag ang conclusion kapag hindi nasasagot ng conclusion ang mga tanong na ibinigay natin sa unahang bahagi ng ating pag-aaral. Example, if the question raised at the beginning of the research is, how adequate are digitized learning materials for reading? And the findings prove that the digitized learning materials for reading are less than the actual needs of the learners. Therefore, our conclusion should be, the digitized learning materials for reading are inadequate. Next, conclusions should point out what were factually learned from the inquiry. However, no conclusions should be drawn from the implied or indirect effects of the findings. Ibig sabihin, kung ano ang sinasabi lamang ng datos na nakalap natin, yun ang bibigyan natin ng konklusyon. Example, from the findings that the majority of teachers were non-science majors and the facilities were less than the needs of the students, what has been factually learned is that the majority of the teachers were not qualified to teach science and the science facilities are inadequate. So, hindi natin pwedeng i-conclude agad-agad na the science teaching in the high schools of Province A was weak dahil wala namang datos na nagsasabing mahina talaga ang instruction doon sa schools of Province A. So the weakness of the science teaching is an indirect or implied effect of the non-qualification of the teachers and the inadequacy of the facilities. So this is better placed under the summary of the implications. But if there is a specific question which runs this way, how strong is science instruction in the high schools of Province A as perceived by the teachers and students? Then a conclusion to answer this question should be drawn. However, the respondents should have been asked on how they perceive the degree of strength of the science instruction, whether it is very strong, fairly strong, weak, or very weak. The conclusion should be based upon the responses of the respondents to the questions. Next is conclusions should be formulated concisely, that is brief and short, yet they convey all the necessary information resulting from the study as required by the specific questions. Remember the golden rule, short is sweet. Ensure that your sentences are brief, yet carrying the intended message. Next, without any strong evidence to the contrary, conclusions should be stated categorically. They should be worded as if they are 100% true and correct. They should not give any hint that the researcher has some doubts about their validity and reliability. Siyempre, bilang mananaliksik, alam natin na yung datos na nakalap natin ay totoo at makatotohanan. So dapat tayo bilang mga mananaliksik, hindi natin dapat kinukwestiyon ang sarili natin doon sa bahagi iyon because we as the researcher, we know better. So the use of qualifiers such as probably, perhaps, maybe, and the like should be avoided as much as possible. And conclusions should not be repetitious of any statements anywhere in the thesis. They may be a recapitulation if necessary, but they should be worded differently and they should convey the same information as the statements recapitulated. And lastly, summarize the main points of your research paper. It is helpful to read through your paper a second time to pick out only the most relevant information, facts, and arguments. You should not need to include any more information than the main arguments or facts that you presented in your paper. Kasi kapag nagdagdag pa tayo ng panibagong impormasyon ating mga readers. So the purpose of summarizing the key points topic. Now let us proceed with dangers. There are some dangers to avoid. So there are some pitfalls to avoid in the use of nor utilize quantitative data without asking questions or analysis, even if they are presented and analyzed very critically to avoid misleading interpretations and conclusions. First, of course, nabanggit na rin ito last week, bias. Halimbawa, an advertisement may quote statistics to show that a given product, yung product nila ay mas epektibo kaysa doon sa ibang leading brand. Dapat mangamba tayo sa bahaging ito sa pagkakagamit ng statistics. Kasi obvious naman na, alam naman natin at obvious naman na mayroong profit motive behind. Ganun din, nabanggit na rin ni Sir Kevin Barron last week in terms of bias ng mga respondents. An individual may also do the same. For example, a respondent to a questionnaire or in an interview may commit the same bias to protect, of course, their own interests. For example, like the case of the science teachers na binabanggit natin kanina in the high schools of Province A, they may respond that science facilities in the respective schools are adequate, although hindi naman talaga, kasi gusto nilang protektahan ang pangalan ng kanilang paaralan. So if there is a way of checking the veracity of presented data by investigation or observation or otherwise, this should be done to ensure the accuracy of the conclusion based upon the data under consideration. Next is incorrect generalization. So an incorrect generalization is made when there is a limited body of information or when the sample is not representative of the population. Ibig sabihin, yung nakuhang sample, hindi niya nire-representa ang kabuuan ng populasyon. Halimbawa, the Alumni Association of a big university would like to conduct a survey to determine the average income of the alumni during their first 10 years after graduation. So, though the total number of returns may meet the sample size requirement, the population may not be represented by the actual composition of the sample. Kasi this is likely to happen because chances are that a great majority of the alumni in the high-income bracket will respond readily. Samantalang yung mga group naman ng mga those who are not doing well may ignore the survey by reason of pride. Maaring mahiya sila. So in such a case, the high-income group is overrepresented and low-income group is underrepresented in the sample, resulting in the overestimate of the average income of the entire alumni group. This is the result of a built-in sampling bias. So built-in sampling bias happens when some members of a population are selected in favor of the purpose of the researcher. Next, incorrect deduction. This happens when a general rule is applied to a specific case. Example, the science facilities in the high schools of province A are inadequate. Can we conclude then at once that any tool or equipment is inadequate? Knowing that there's an oversupply of test tubes, hence to make conclusion that all science equipment and tools in the schools of province A are inadequate is an incorrect deduction in this case. Okay? Ibig sabihin, wag natin i-conclude agad kung hindi naman natin nakita talaga kung ano ba sa mga science facilities ang kulang dito sa kung anong kulang dito sa population, tinitignan natin. Sorry. Hello? Ma'am? No, nawawala-wala po
Yes
ata.
Oo. Pag nag-unstable po ang internet connection.
Ang
medyo
lakas po kasi ng
nawawala.
ulan dito.
Okay lang sir, naririnig ka naman po. Naririnig ka po.
Sige po. Salamat. Ayan, so next we also have the incorrect comparison. A basic error in statistical work is to compare two things that are not comparable. Suppose a survey in school C has been found to have 20 microscopes and school D has only 8. We may conclude immediately that school C is better equipped with microscopes than school D. However, upon further inquiry, school C has 1,500 students, while school D, they only have 500 students. Hence, the ratio in school C is 75 students is 1:1 microscope. While school D, they only have the ratio 650 students is to 1 microscope. So to conclude that school C is better equipped with microscopes than school D based on the number of microscopes owned by each school is an incorrect comparison. Next, abuse of correlation data. A correlation study may show a high degree of association between two variables. They may move in the same direction at the same rate, but it is not right to conclude at once that one is the cause of the other unless confirmed by other studies. Example, when the government increases the price of gasoline, the prices of commodities. We cannot immediately conclude that the increase in the price of gasoline is the sole cause of the increase in the prices of commodities, because there are other causes to be considered, such as a shortage of undersupply of the commodities, increased cost of production, panic buying, and etc. To make a conclusive to be able to make a conclusive statement as to what is or what are the real causes of the increases in prices of commodities, an intensive investigation is needed. And limited information furnished by any one ratio. A ratio shows only a partial picture in most analytical work. Example, suppose the only information that we have about a certain establishment is that the ratio does not show the kind of employees leaving and kung ano ang dahilan kung bakit sila umalis. We do not know whether the losses of the employees are caused by death, retirement ba, resignations, or dismissals. So we can only surmise, but we cannot conclude with definiteness that the causes of the 20% employee turnover are death, retirement, poor working conditions, poor salary, etc. So let us avoid as much as possible making conclusions not sufficiently and adequately supported by facts. And lastly, misleading impression concerning magnitude of base variables. Ratios can give erroneous impressions when they are used to express relationships between two variables of small magnitudes. Example, a college announced that 75% of its graduates passed the CPA examination at a certain time. And another college also advertised that 100% of each graduate passed the CPA examination. We may give the impression that the standard of instruction in the two colleges is high, but actually only 4 graduates from the first college took the CPA licensing examination, and the 3 happened to pass the first school, while in the second college, only 1 of its graduates took the same examination and he happened to pass. So to avoid making false variables of very small magnitudes, use the original data because the relationship is clear even without the use of ratio. So we may say that of the first college, we may say that the 3 out of 4 graduates who took the CPA test passed, and of the second college, we may say that the 1 graduate who took the same test passed. So to wrap up our discussion in the guidelines in writing research conclusions, let us have these tips to keep in mind when you write your research paper conclusion. First, keep your thesis main points and summarize facts clear and concise. Dapat ay malinaw. Ibigay lang natin ang mga importante mga detalye at higit sa lahat ay mayroong kaisahan. Avoid beginning your conclusion with statements like in conclusion or in summary, as these basic statements can come across as redundant. So parang paulit-ulit lamang siya. Like for example, sa unang conclusion, in conclusion, tapos sa pangalawang in conclusion. So redundant ang dating. If you get overwhelmed by sticking to a basic summarizing format for your conclusion, if you get overwhelmed, try sticking to a basic summarizing format for your conclusion. Let's stick to the basic. And synthesize your information by providing questions and answers, results, suggestions, or resolutions to your arguments. Include only the most relevant points and arguments you presented in your paper. Huwag tayo magdadagdag ng panibagong impormasyon dahil makakapagpalito lamang ito sa mga readers. And avoid repeating information that you have already discussed. So kung na-discuss na siya doon sa gitnang body part of the research, dapat hindi na siya ulit-ulitin pang banggitin doon sa conclusion part ng ating research. So writing a research paper may follow the same structure, but the approach to writing the concluding section may vary depending on the area of the discipline of your research paper and its conventions. The tone of your research paper, whether it is analytical, argumentative, explanatory, etc., also plays a role in choosing the best approach. For example, if you would like to invite your reader to consider and explore a new idea that has developed from your argument, posing a new question may be the right strategy to use. If you would like to delve into the possible weaknesses in your research, addressing limitations may be the best way to go. Whatever the strategy or approach you would use, make sure that it maintains the consistency of the flow and tone of your research paper, as well as deliver your final message clearly and with impact you desire to leave to your readers. So that's it for conclusion. Now let us proceed with recommendation. So what is research recommendations? Recommendations are appeals to people or entities concerned to solve or help solve the problems discovered in the inquiry. So recommendations urge specific actions to be taken regarding policy, practice, theory, or subsequent research. So a research recommendation suggests actions to be taken based on the findings. For an instance, you can make recommendations or subsequent research that can be conducted, especially if there is an interest in generalizing the findings beyond the study's parameters. You may have identified gaps in the literature that should be addressed and to which your study may or may not have contributed. So it is also based in conclusions, and it is not based on biases or beliefs that are not supported by the data. There are three components to a good recommendation. First, what? Recommending a course of action. Find significance relationships in the data. Do a common sense check. Ibig sabihin, ano ba dapat ang i-recommend natin batay sa resulta o kinalabasan ng pag-aaral natin? So kung ano ang resulta, dapat ibigyan din natin ng karampatan na rekomendasyon. A course of action. Ano ang dapat na gawin upang matulungan na masolusyonan ang problemang lumabas sa ating pag-aaral? Why? Giving data-based evidence why you recommended this. So you give evidence from your data why you made such recommendation. And how? Further detail about the action. You have to give details kung ano yung specific na dapat na gawin. Ano ba yung gusto nating i-recommenda na gusto nating gawin ng kung sino man ang pinatutunguhan ng ating recommendation. So just like in writing research conclusions, we also have guidelines in writing research recommendations. So as mentioned above, recommendations should address limitations and suggest how they might be overcome in future work. So it should aim to solve or help solve problems discovered in the investigation. Example, ang finding ay province A lacks adequate facilities in teaching science. So dapat lang nang i-recommenda natin ay the school should acquire more facilities. So recommending these would really help the school to address the problem. No recommendation should be made for a problem or anything for that matter that has not been discovered or discussed, syempre, in the study. So wag tayo magbibigay ng conclusion na hindi naman natin diniscuss doon sa study natin. Okay? Example, ang conclusion natin is the digitized learning materials for reading are inadequate. Then, wrong recommendation na sumulat pa tayo ng mas marami pa or mag-develop pa tayo ng mas maraming printed learning materials kasi ang problema nga ay kakulangan ng digitized learning materials. There may also be recommendations for the continuance of a good practice or system or even recommendations for its improvement. Halimbawa, nakita natin sa pag-aaral natin na na okay pala yung practice na ginagawa nila. So, pwede natin i-recommend na ipagpatuloy nila or paigtingin pa ang paggamit ng estratehiya o proyektong iyon. So recommendations should aim for the ideal, but they must be feasible, practical, and attainable. So wag tayong magre-recommend ng bagay na hindi naman kayang gawin. Okay? So it is useless to recommend the impossible. But this of course depends on the situation. Recommendations should be logical and valid, of course. Recommendations should be addressed to the persons, entities, agencies, or offices who or which are in a position to implement them. Example, an example from a researcher here in Ilocos, Sir Ryan V. Aquino. This research was birth funded in Region 1. The research title is The Effect of Iconized Outer Physics Activities on the Conceptual Understanding of the Projectile Motion. So, ang recommendation niya dito, ina-address niya sa mga teachers na the teachers should use iconized outdoor physics activities in teaching physics, especially on projectile motion, to improve active participation of the students and to enhance their performance in the class. So, kung gusto nating i-address sa ASDS, sa SDS, to the school principals, dapat i-direct natin sa kanila ang recommendation natin. And there should also be a recommendation for a further research on the same topic in other places to verify, amplify, or negate the findings of the study. So those were the guidelines po in writing the research recommendations. Yeah, I think that ends my presentation. Here are my references. Ayan, maraming salamat po. In Ilocano we say, agyamanak. Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. Hello, Doc Niro.
Yes po. Yes, sir. Medyo bumagal din yung internet ko dito sa Cam Norte. Hello, sir.
Hello, Doc.
Yes po.
Okay na po, Doc. Tapos na po ang aking presentation.
Yes po. Nag-ano kasi. Teka.
Maski dito po, ang lakas ng ulan ngayon, pa on and off din ang kuryente.
Okay. So, thank you so much, sir. Nag-iba na ang kulay ko. Ibang monitor na po ang gamit ko. Yung isa kasi hindi na nakaka-connect. Okay, thank you so much, Sir Jose Valdez, for such an enlightening and very informative sharing to us. So your talk about conclusions and recommendations surely help us and will surely help us in formulating the conclusion and recommendation of our researches or future researches that we will be conducting. So thank you very much for your sharing. So may we ask now our participants if you have questions. So you can write it in the chat box, or you can open your cam and your microphone to address the question to our speaker as regards his sharing to us about conclusions and recommendations. Do you have questions po? Okay, so meron po bang tanong?
Nahihiya pa sila, Doc.
Nahihiya pa silang magtanong. Oo nga, kasi medyo bago pa lang, o kaya naman naintindihan po nilang masyado yung presentation ng ating speaker or lecturer ngayong gabi na si Sir Jose. So sabi po dito sa ating chat box, sabi ni Sir Dominic Patrick, sabi niya, si Sir Lemuel. Sir Lemuel, sabi niya, excellent presentation, Sir Jose. Congratulations. And then from Sir Dominic Patrick, thank you and congratulations, Sir Joe. Okay. So, yung iba pa po, meron po ba tayong questions, points to clarify, and everything.
Doc, pwede po ba akong mag-share?
Sige po, sige po.
Konti lang po. Hindi ko na po on camera ko, no, Doc. Medyo shy type po kasi ako.
Shy type ka din po, Doc.
Hindi na-appreciate ko po tong presentation ni Sir Jose. Isa po yan sa mga ipinagmamalaki ng ETCOR mula sa Ilocos region. Agyamanak, sir. Salamat po. Tama ba yung Agyamanak ko? Ayun po. Alam nyo, opo. Ang discussion ni sir, ang mga topics po niya ngayon which are about conclusion and recommendations ay napakahalaga po sa pagsusulat ng research. Kasi po napapansin natin, ako po nagtuturo po ako sa mga senior high at nagko-coach din po ako, nagtuturo din po ako sa mga nag-aaral sa masters at saka po sa mga nagdo-doktor. Kung minsan po ang part na yan, yung conclusions and recommendations, diyan bumababa ang energy ng mga researchers. Yung tipong di po ba ang sabi nila, itotodo mo yung energy mo kapag sa discussion kasi yun ang isa yun sa pinaka tinitingnan nila. Kung paano mong na-discuss yung naging resulta ng study mo, yung naging resulta ng analysis mo, kay quali or quanti man yan. Pagdating doon sa part ng recommendations, conclusion and recommendations, napapansin ko sa mga papers dyan sila medyo bumababa yung energy nila, yung parang yung nag-uulit na lang. Kaya nga maganda yung presentation po ni Sir Jose. Napakita niya ano yung mga magandang i-practice natin when we are doing the conclusion part and the recommendations part. Kasi ibigay mo yung buong energy mo sa discussion tapos biglang magbababa yung energy mo pagdating ng conclusion and recommendations. Parang meron ding mali, hindi ba? So kailangan ituloy mo lang yon, kaya po na-appreciate ko po ang discussion ni Sir Jose. Salamat po. Back to you po, Doc Glenda.
Okay po. Thank you very much, Sir Richard. Nahiya na rin ako, hindi na ako nag-open ng cam. Okay. So, I agree sa sinabi po ni Doc
Doc Richard. Talagang isa sa mga medyo nahihirapan lalo na yung ating mga students in writing their research is on that part of conclusion and recommendation. Kasi nga siguro dahil last part na siya, as per experience also when I was still teaching sa junior high school, is that siguro kasi ang feeling nila is because it is already last part na ng research ay hindi na nila tututukan. Pero if they are to consider na dapat makonsider nila na that is kumbaga napaka-importante nun because that is the summary as Sir Jose have said or have shared in his presentation kanina. Okay? So we have here a comment. Sabi ni Sir Paul Capote, Sir, what would you suggest that the researcher will do if the conclusion based on the result is detrimental to the organization? Sir Jose. So sabi po ni Sir Paul, Sir, what would you suggest that the researcher will do if the conclusion based on the result is detrimental to the organization? If the research has something to do with the organization, let's say, for example, implementation of some projects or of some policies or programs, and then the result, or yes, the result could be a kind of detrimental to the organization. So ano daw pong gagawin?
Halimbawa siguro dyan, Doc, yung kung palpak ang, di ba, halimbawa sa isang study, ang ano mo ay yung implementation ng particular project. At tapos lumabas sa study mo na maraming, sorry to use the term, no, maraming kapalpakan. So ang tinatanong ngayon kay Sir Jose ay ano ang dapat gawin ng isang researcher? Go, Kuya Jose.
Yeah. Yes, Sir Jose.
Di ba po sir, napaka-importante na ang isang research ay dapat honest, yung integridad ng research, hindi po ba? So siguro yung paraan po siguro ng pagkaka-state ng conclusion.
Okay. So sabi ni Sir Jose is we should be honest. Meron naman talagang ano 'yon sa intellectual honesty in writing our researches. So siguro ay sa pagka-state na lang daw po ng ano. So if it is the result, so we must report it, but see to it that the way in which we are going to state the conclusion is yung sabihin natin hindi naman siya yung pwede bang sabihin na nakaka-hurt or hindi naman talaga yung sabihin nating ano bang magandang term na gamitin dyan, yung subtle, but you also mention or you also write down the result kung yun talaga yung nakuha natin na result. Okay, we still have another question here. So according to Sir Conrad, I agree, Doc Richard. Sabi niya. So, ask ko lang po, kung may ruling po tayo sa conclusions and recommendations, kung ilan po ba ang SOPs, ganun din po ba karami ang conclusions and recommendations? Thanks po. Okay,
Usually,
so yun po yung tanong ni...
Yes po.
Okay,
Then so po sa
sige
question ni Sir Conrad, usually ganun po ang ating practice kung ilan po yung research questions or statements natin, statement of the problems natin, ganun din yung bilang ng ating conclusions and recommendations. However, kung kaya nating pagkasyahin sa isang conclusion, yung for example, yung questions natin, pwede rin naman po yun. And usually kasi depende rin yan sa practice ng schools. For example, kung nire-require ng school ninyo or tawag dito, practice na ng university or school ninyo na dapat kung ilan yung question, ganun din ang bilang ng conclusions or recommendations.
So, okay. So, yun po. So, thank you very much, Sir Jose. We have here a sharer. So, may sharing si Ma'am Lourdes Maniscan. Sabi niya, share ko, excuse me po. Hello po. May nagsasalita po ba? Baka gustong mag-share or anything?
Doc Glenn, si Sir J. Saldivar, kanina pa nakatas ang kamay. Baka he would like to share
Ay,
something.
sorry po. Hindi ko kasi nakikita sa screen ko. Sorry
Sige
po.
po, okay lang
Sorry.
po.
Okay. Sige po. Sir J. Saldivar. Sorry po.
Yes, ma'am. Naimbag nga gabi, sir. Medyo
Hello sir,
ano,
naimbag garabiin.
may concern lang din kasi ako sa kunwari nagko-conduct ako ng parallel research with a counterpart. Lalo na foreign counterpart. Ngayon, paano naman kung diverging yung namin, yung kunwari yung conference ay yung conclusion pala, sorry. Pero parehas kami ng ng field work. Ito sa archaeology kasi ito. I'm currently taking I'm writing my thesis in archaeology. And so does with my counterpart. Pero ang problema naman di ko lang alam kung ma-address nyo rin to or if you can offer me advice. Paano kung diverging yung namin, yung conclusion or yung findings, yung not necessarily contradicting, pero parang nag-iba yung direction ng namin, ng study namin sa gitna ng pagsulat namin ng thesis, ganyan. Sir?
Okay, so what Sir J is saying is or asking is pag nag-divert, alin po yung Sir J nag-divert na to clarify po your
Glenda, hello
your
po.
question. Yes
I
po.
think Sir J, importante po siguro na kung nagda-diverge po yung findings, it is important that you go back with your research methodology. Baka may something na hindi nasunod or doon sa process.
Okay po, sir. We'll try to do that siguro.
Ayun, nabanggit na rin ni Dr. Glenn Villones yung review the methodology.
I see.
Si Sir Ian nagtataas po ng kamay. Sir Ian Lianares. Doc Ian.
Hi, magandang gabi sa inyong lahat.
Ma'am Glenn, pasensya ka na, ako na yung tumawag kasi sabi mo kanina hindi mo po nakikita yung nagre-raise ng kamay. Pasensya na po.
Yes po, opo. No probs po Sir Doc Richard. No problem po.
Opo, just to support Sir Jose at dun sa queries ni Sir Saldivar. Aside from reviewing your methods, tapos nakita mo na wala namang inconsistencies with your methods, I guess it is interesting to cite on your conclusions bakit naging divergent yung results. Kasi if you're going to publish that in journals, yan yung mga magugustuhan nila. Kasi number one, that is something na beyond on our assumptions. Na we are expecting na dapat ito yung makikita natin pero this is different from what is written on the RRL. Kasi ang studies naman should provide a new understanding and new discoveries. So I guess that's not a problem At syempre, ako, I'm not in your field pero ang nakikita ko doon, syempre there's a tendency na magkaroon talaga ng divergent results kasi a parallel study from different schools or countries may there's a chance no na iba talaga no yung maging setup and yung maging results, especially kung archaeological findings yung inaaral. But even though in the field of psychology sa area namin, ganun din no. Share ko lang yung experience ko. I have one research na ang sinasabi ng mga RRL is yung hope trait is directly connected with another variable that I'm using no. At ginamit ako ng regression analysis yun. Pero lumalabas, inverse yung results. So aside from reviewing the literature, wala akong makita that are similar. And then doon sa methodology, ni-review na namin. So wala namang violations when using the regression analysis. And then we consult somebody from the foreign country. And then sinabi niya, that's a good finding. Kung you think na walang violations and then wala sa RRL, that's a new finding that you have to report. So ganun din dyan, sir. Sir, I think that's interesting to read. No? Ako, for me, ang stand ko, mas interesado akong basahin yung something that is new for me, no, rather than replication ng what is already on the literature itself. Kasi it's just a validation of what is existing studies all about. Yun lang ang thoughts ko dyan.
Sir, follow. If that's the case, pwede bang i-cite ko na lang, idagdag ko yung parallel research na ginagawa ng aking, lalo na foreign counterpart kasi kung yung kapartner ko, kung ganun. Idagdag ko na lang sa reference.
Sir Jay, pakiulit mo po, medyo yung boses nag-choppy kanina. Paulit na lang po.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Ayun, if that's the case, would it be advisable kung isama ko na lang yung ginawa niya sa aking reference or bibliography?
Sir Jay, kanino po naka-address ang tanong mo? Sa speaker, kay Sir Jose, or dun sa follow up dun sa sagot sa'yo kay Dr. Rianares?
Both of them can answer.
Okay po, thank you po. Sir Jose, Sir Ian.
Sir Jay, I think the best solution for that one is to consult your advisor. No? I think you have your advisor for doing that research, no? Para mag-guide ka niya rin which one is mas feasible, mas doable on your part. Kasi syempre, kailangan yung flow ng, lagi nga sabi ni Doc Richard na merong story yung research. No? So dapat consistent yung flow from the beginning until the end. So if those results would be divergent and then tingin mo kasi kung isa-cite mo yon as reference, so maybe you have other things in your mind, and the best one to clear that would be your advisor who are leading you for that parallel studies. Yan po. That's my take for that.
Okay
Thank
po,
you,
thank
sir.
you po. Alam mo, Sir Jay, mag-a-add din ako kung okay lang, pasensya na po. No? Gusto ko yung
Yes, sir.
naging sagot sa'yo ni Dr. Lianares. Na ako siguro gagamitin kong term yung kapanapanabik nga yun kapag meron kang mga resulta na parang iba siya sa naging result ng iba na ito yung kasi sabi ko nga tayo mga researchers, aminin man natin at hindi, bago ka pa nagtanong meron ka ng kasagutan at the back of your mind, meron ka ng kasagutan, meron ng gustong puntahan yung yung research mo. Pero ngayon, lumilitaw sa study mo, parang merong mga kakaibang results na nagdedebate pa yung mga results. Maganda 'yon kasi that means na wag mong kontrolin 'yon, wag mong pabayaang anong tawag dito? Kontrolin mo sila para lang lumitaw yung hinihingi ng usual na nakikita natin. Kapanapanabik 'yon kasi that means meron pa talagang dapat pag-usapan. Yung tipong
binasa mo 30 related literature and studies, sinasabi niya na merong direct relationship halimbawa, tapos merong isa, dalawa na nabasa mo na hindi. Kapanapanabik yun kasi may ibig sabihin nun, sa dinami-dami ng mga available na nagsasabi na ganito, meron pa palang dapat pag-aralan, debatable pa rin yung bagay na yun. Kumbaga meron pang research gap, mayroon pang further studies na pwedeng mangyari doon. So tama yung sinabi ni Sir Jay. At balikan ko lang po yung kanina, no, although nasagot na rin po ni Sir Jose, bago ko lang po makalimutan. Nagtatas din ng kamay si Ma'am Evelyn. Ma'am Evelyn, mabilis lang po to para hindi ko lang po makalimutan. Yung tinanong po kanina about dun sa paano kung detrimental halimbawa yung sagot, yung findings mo doon sa isang organization, yung kasi ang nagiging delikado yon, parang kumuha ka na nga ng respondent sa kanila, ginamit mo na nga ang datos nila, tapos at the end of the study, lilitaw pa sa result na something negative about the organization, something na hindi maganda para sa kanila. Pero yun nga, tama si Sir Jose, wala tayong magagawa kung yun ang resulta ng study. Yun nga lang, merong paraan para i-present mo yon nang hindi ganoon na hindi naman natin sinasabing pagtakpan mo. Ipe-present mo siya sa isang paraan na scientific, na ginagawa mo ito. Anyway, we are researchers. We are seeking for the truth. We would like to know the truth, and that is the result of research. Kaya siguro pumapasok din dito. Kung I do not know kung ano po yung practice sa mga schools or universities ninyo, di po ba meron kapag nagre-research tayo, makakasyempo ka ng mga research na hindi naman nila pinapangalanan ng institution. Yung tinatago nila halimbawa, ang pangalan halimbawa ng eskwelahan ay Mababang Paaralan ng San Roque. Pero hindi niya i-identify yung school na yon. Pwede ngang ilalagay lang niya sa title niya o kaya sa method section niya, a review of the implementation of Project A in a school in Region 3 halimbawa. So kumbaga, sa dinami-dami ng school sa Region 3, hindi mo na ngayon alam kung anong school ang tinutukoy nila. Merong iba na a school in the division ganito. Pero kung gusto mo pang lawakan, a school in this particular region, pwede yung ganoon. Although kung minsan makakatsyempo ka naman ng mga professors or mga na ayaw nila ng ganoon, ayaw nila ng tinatago, sasabihin nila, o itong school na tinutukoy mo, ito pala yung sa Mababang Paaralan ng San Roque, bakit nilalagay mo pang a school in Region 3, bakit hindi mo pa pangalanan ng San Roque? Kaya ako na-appreciate ko yung tinatago din yung pagkakakilanlan ng mismong institution, kasi hindi mo alam kung ano yung mangyayari sa dulo, hindi mo kontrolado yun eh. Although kung minsan makakasyempo ka nga, yun nga, mga universities or mga professors ng practices nila is ayaw nila ng tinatago ng ganoon. Gusto nila nandun kaagad yung pinag-uusapang institution. Okay po, so yun lang po, nabalikan ko lang po, naisip ko kasi na it would also be good na i-share po. Doc Evelyn po.
Hello po, good evening po. Yeah, this is Evelyn from Pangasinan po. I agree with you po na we have to consider the research ethics, kumbaga. We don't usually mention the institution or name of respondents. Pero pwede po rin po sigurong sabihin din o i-report din kung may content. Pwede rin po sigurong ganun po. May tanong po ako dun sa concern regarding po dun sa diverging findings. Diverging ba yun? Divergent? Matanong ko po, yung po bang diverging na sinasabi nyo is yung bang study mo po with your counterpart po is exactly the same po ba? Kasi which means that yung naging findings niya does not agree with your findings. Yun po yung scenario po. Kung
Yes,
ganun po
ma'am.
yes po, ganun po ba? Same exact po talaga yung study po with your counterpart
Yes, ma'am.
po.
Yes, ma'am.
For me po, para sa akin po, you may report both findings naman. Basta po, supported with facts or with data po. Para sa akin. You may report both, although nagko-contradict sila, basta may suporta, may evidences. At kung makakaya po, parang mag-meet at the end po, parang ganon, mag-meet din sila, parang ganon. Yun po yung sa akin po. Yun po yung opinion ko or pananaw ko rin bilang isang researcher kasi I've been researching for a decade already. And nagkakaroon po talaga ng cases na ganyan po. Pwedeng hindi mag-agree yung mga findings. But then for me, you can still report naman both findings kahit na nag-disagreeable sila. Basta you could support based on sa facts and data that you've gathered. Yun po yung para sa akin. Thank you for the opportunity to share. Good evening
Salamat
po
po,
sa ating
Doc
lahat.
Evelyn. Sir Lemuel, you were
Thank
raising
you po,
your
ma'am.
hand po kanina. Sir Lemuel. Doc Glenda, nandyan pa po kayo?
Yes.
Pasensya
Yes,
na
I
po,
am
pasensya na
listening.
po.
Yes,
Sige po.
okay lang po, okay lang.
Sir Lemuel. Parang nakamute ka pa, kuya.
Walang sound. Wala pong sound si Sir Lemuel.
Balikan na lang po natin,
Hello.
Doc Glenn.
Hello po.
Ay, ayan na po, ayan na po.
Ayan. Sir, sorry po for the microphone. Actually nabigyan na po rin ng sagot kanina. Yung sa ating recommendations and conclusions na what if it's detrimental. Kasi I believe that the recommendations, the recommendation is conclusion and recommendations are important part of our research since this is an eye-opener even though it is detrimental to the community or to the organization. Somehow, through these two parts, we are able to see the possible interventions that we could do in order for us to make our organization better. Just to share po, actually in SLU, it is such an excellent institution in the North. But believe it or not, we are also doing our parang internal audit po ba ng aming performance also. And we are always excited to look into the results and other conclusions, results, and discussions. And the recommendations. This is where we are also getting our way of looking whether what we are doing is working or not already. In the end, we are able to craft policies that will make our system better. Yun lang po.
Okay, so thank you very much for the sharing also, Sir Lemuel. Okay, so napakaganda po ng ating pagpapalitan ng mga nalalaman tungkol sa research. At we have enlightened. Sabi nga dito sa isang comment po sa ating chat box is yun, so maraming insights and surely it will help us kung halimbawang sa pagsusulat natin ng ating ng research, most specifically the conclusions and recommendations is ma-meet natin yung ganoong same situations, the situations which were shared by our participants tonight is alam natin kung ano yung gagawin natin. Kaya maganda talaga yung may pagpapalitan ng ganitong mga insights natin, ng mga knowledge natin, especially in terms of the research process or how we are going to write down our our researches. Okay?
Doc, yun po, gusto ko rin po sanang i-share. Anyway po, ang research naman talaga, ang purpose natin ay makapag-recommend, hindi ba? Ngayon, kung ano man ang naging resulta ng study mo, your role, you are called as a researcher to give these recommendations. Now, whether or not papakinggan ka or hindi, o kaya titingnan nila ng masama yung naging resulta ng research mo kung kaninong authorities mo man nire-recommend yan, nasa sa kanila na lang yon. Kung they will take action, they will address those things na nakita mo, salamat sa Diyos. Kung hindi nila i-address yon, problema na nila yon. Anyway, bilang isang mananaliksik, ang role lang natin ay mag-recommend. Hindi tayo pwedeng mag-impose. 'Di ba nga merong kasabihan sa research, sabi nila research proposes not imposes. Yung we cannot impose yung mga recommendations natin. Pwede lang nating i-recommend sa kanila. Kung gagawin nila or hindi, nasa sa kanila yun. Kumbaga, I'm gonna use the term na ginamit kanina ni Sir Lemuel, although alam niyo naman, sa controversy ang kinasasangkutan ng isang sikat na celebrity yon. Sabi niya, as a friend, siguro ibigay mo lang yung yung recommendations mo as a friend. Kung hindi niya tatanggapin, bahala siya sa buhay niya. Ngayon kung tatanggapin niya, siguro yun yung ibig lang sabihin no, na talagang open siya sa mga naging resulta ng research mo. Mas may improve niya yung policy or project o yung mismong organization. Kasi hanggang doon lang tayo tayong mga mananaliksik, hindi natin pwedeng ipagpilitan na lumabas sa research ko, lumabas sa pananaliksik ko, ganito, dapat gawin mo to, dapat ganon. Hindi ganon ang isang researcher. Hanggang nandun lang tayo sa level na dahil ganito ang lumabas sa research ko, I am recommending this. Now, whether or not kung tatanggapin mo ito, ay that is already your call. Lalo na tayo kung nandun lang tayo sa level na hindi tayo nasa administration part, 'di ba? Kasi usually ang para ma-address mo yung mga bagay-bagay na 'yan, nasa admin level ka dapat, ikaw ang nasa mga implementers or mga nasa executive level ka. Pero kung tayo ay mga pure researchers lamang na wala doon sa level na 'yon, what we can do is simply to recommend. The rest of ng mga bagay-bagay nasa sa kanila yun na 'yon kung gagawin po nila. Thank you po. Back to you Doc Glenda.
Okay, so thank you very much po, Doc Richard. So we have here another comment in the chat box from Sir Glenn Villones. Sabi niya, that is why we may use may in giving recommendation, not can but may. And then sabi ni Sir Ian Lenares, right, Sir Glenn. Okay. So pwedeng gamitin or pwedeng i-adapt or pwedeng tanggapin. And at the same time, pwede rin hindi. Okay, so nakadepende na doon sa tatanggap noong mga recommendations na ibinigay. So, okay, so sabi ko nga po kanina, napakaganda nung pagpapalitan ng mga kuro-kuro at mga insights natin ngayong gabi. So kung wala na po, so meron pa po ba? May mga katanungan pa? O wala na, may mga sharings pa? Okay, so if we have none, so Doc Richard, we proceed
Yes
na
po.
po with
Sige po, ma'am.
okay. So at this juncture, we will go to the awarding of virtual certificate to our speaker. So let me share to you the speaker that we will be giving to Sir Jose. Okay, so let me read to you the text of the certificate that we will be giving to Sir Jose. So, ETCOR Educational Research Center, Santa Ana, Pampanga, Philippines presents this certificate of recognition to Jose Victoriano-Valdez, research consultant at ETCOR Educational Research Center, for his invaluable time and expertise as resource speaker in the national webinar on quantitative research of ETCOR Educational Research Center held on September 15 and 29 and October 13, 2021, and conducted under the advocacy project Sagip Mananaliksik for Everyone, with advisory from the Department of Education. So signed by Bernadette L. Lejarde, LPT, MAGC, PhD, overall project coordinator. And this is also signed by Richard D. Sanchez, LPT, PhD, Head Research Consultant of ETCOR. Okay, so let us all give once again Sir Valdez another virtual round of applause. So,
Maraming
thank
salamat
you.
po, ETCOR. Dr. Richard, maraming salamat po for all the sharings. Maraming salamat po.
Okay, so may we invite you to upcoming ETCORS event on September 29, 2021. The topic is Summary of Learning in Quantitative Research, and on October 13, 2021, Tips to a Successful and Stress-Free Research Oral Defense. Okay. Now, those who would like to avail of ETCOR's official t-shirt and polo shirts being sold by Blueprint Shop, owned by Dr. Mark Joseph V. Sangil. The link is there posted. It is not ETCOR that is selling the shirts, but Blueprint Shop. We are only a beneficiary of certain percentage of the sales. So if you are interested, you might want to contact Dr. Sangil at this link. Okay, so we are almost done. So now we call in Ma'am Karen Krista M. Escobar, MSMT, RMT, Instructor 1 in the College of Nursing, Department of Medical Technology in Cavite State University, Indang, Cavite, for the closing message.
Good evening po. Doc Glenda, am I loud and clear po, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you po. Good evening po. I would like to express my gratitude to our speaker, Dr. Jose Victoriano-Valdez, for sharing his knowledge, tips, and experiences on writing the conclusions and recommendations of a quantitative research. Moreover, I am also grateful to our team members, Dr. Glenda Rito, our moderator, Sir Lemuel Mariano, and of course also to our head research consultant, Dr. Richard Sanchez, for their support and contributions in the success of this webinar. My deepest gratitude also to my other co-research consultants for supporting this evening's event. To all the participants who attended this webinar, thank you, and we hope to see you again in our succeeding webinar series, and that you'll also consider to be part of our growing family, the ETCOR family. Okay, so let me close this virtual event by saying that nothing is worth fulfilling that comes easy, just like in research and in our life. The road to finishing your final paper may be challenging and tiring at times, and I know that all of us will agree with that. But just always keep your eye in the right direction and let God walk you through it. Thank you, everyone. Let us continue to embrace the culture of research. Stay safe and healthy, and God bless us all.
Okay, so thank you so much, Ma'am Krista. So before we finally end this this lecture or this event this evening, I'd like everybody to open their cams for a picture taking for documentation. Ako na lang po yung ako po yung mag-shot. Okay, so pa-open po ng inyong mga cams, pa-open daw ng cams, sasa ko hindi naka-open. Okay. So